So after sharing how I do the outer space backgrounds for Planet of a Thousand Moons, I had a few people reaching out to ask me how exactly I do the mysterious thing with watercolor and isopropyl alcohol, so I thought I'd do a little quick tutorial on how this works. As far as materials go, things are pretty simple. I have some drawing paper here. Watercolor works best, but I didn't have any on hand. I've got a cheap well set. You can use Crayola or whatever. Nice watercolors are always great, but not everybody has that. I have some watercolor brushes. You can get those pretty cheap at Michael's. A cup of water and a bottle of isopropyl rubbing alcohol, which I have poured into this little cup. And of course, you're just going to want a paper towel of some sort. To start, you just want to paint with watercolor like you normally would, kind of randomly. I want to keep it really nice and juicy wet. You can see that it's just really thick with the water. I'm going to mess around with some different colors. I want to keep it, again, very, very wet so that there's something for the isopropyl rubbing alcohol to work with. So keep building this up, making sure there's lots of water. Then I'm going to wash off my brush and dry it off a bit. And then I'm going to take some of the rubbing alcohol, and if I just touch it, it acts as a resist. You can see it right there. And it creates this really interesting little rings. So I can even like flick it, and it does it like crazy. And as it dries, it creates these really sharp rings. Make another field. Again, it needs to be nice and juicy. I teach, and when I use the term juicy in front of my kids, they get really mad about it. They think it's very funny that I use it, but in the most embarrassing way possible. But when I don't use it, kids tend to let this stuff dry out, and then it just doesn't work. There needs to be water, which is what the isopropyl rubbing alcohol is resisting. So I'm gonna grab it now. You can also create pathways with it. So I'm gonna try a spiral. And it just immediately resists the water. And you can create all sorts of fun patterns. This works with all sorts of colors. As long as it's wet when you're working on it. The other thing that's kind of fun is as it dries, you can layer on top, paint around things, and just really mess with this. So once I get this down, this one's a little less wet than some of the other ones. If I decide I want to get some more bluey green in there, I can start dropping that in, which works very similarly to how you would normally add like wet on wet with watercolor. But now that there is the alcohol in here, it's doing like a reverse resist. And so I can really create some interesting stuff. Oddly enough, when you add the color into where the alcohol is already resisted from your first layer, you're gonna get some sharp edges. So this is now a big mixture of rubbing alcohol and water. And so it's like kind of competing back and forth with itself. As a technique, this is just really playful, and you can get a lot of different weird effects. Once it starts to dry, you'll get a different effect than when it's, like this is starting to settle, even though there's big pools of color. But then even if you dip it into the big pools of color, it's gonna react, and it's gonna do these weird things, which is just super fun to just see what's gonna happen. And you can see that like it'll kind of come back and recover itself. But then I can kind of drag it around without actually dragging it around. And just see what's gonna happen. I just watch it like affect itself. And as it dries, like some of the color will remain, where this is kind of very whitish. Now as I'm putting it in, the purple really remains. Or the blues, the darker hues just really remain. So I can really get some wild patterns. that I have no real control over, and that's half the fun. And every time I do this, my favorite part is just afterwards, just making it all look better by just flicking it and getting that speckling. It's been a few hours and now everything's dry, and I do want to go back into these, but right now you can see how these dots kind of are fully formed. You've got where the watercolor was pooling, you have these really rich darks, but then where the alcohol remained, you get these glowy little ringlets, and they feel like Hubble satellite photos. The spiral has this interesting edge and just little ringlets. Up in here, you could just see all these colors like interacting with each other. But I always like to go into it one more time, so I'm going to take one of these. I'm not going to touch this one. I really like how it turned out, but let's kind of go into the green. We can make this very multi-layered. I'm going to use a smaller brush for the alcohol. And now we just see how this changes yet again. And so we're getting like the resist on top of the resist. And so these shapes will overlap with each other. So that when this dries, it'll be a totally different feel. Again, nothing better than a good flick. Of course, I also flick paint everywhere. Let's drag this out a bit. I think it's a little too... I kind of enjoy the smell of the rubbing alcohol. Whenever I have students come into my room, they're always like, it smells like paint in here. So it's kind of nice for it to smell like a hospital in here. And there you have it. Here is how you use watercolor with isopropyl rubbing alcohol. I really love this method. I really love using abstraction and these like kind of random, uncontrolled marks to be the backgrounds and skyscapes for very intricate drawings. And I hope this is something that you can use too. Enjoy.